Nintendo is no stranger to introducing new and interesting characters to their existing franchises to spark some additional interest along the way. Maybe the character fulfills a role for a single game, or maybe the character becomes a mascot for the franchise moving forward. When it comes to Animal Crossing though, we've seen an abundance of interesting characters used as front-runner mascots or cool special characters for the games, and typically speaking, Animal Crossing characters carry over from one title to the next. So things get really weird when a character seemingly disappears or is removed from the lineup of characters in Animal Crossing. Like for instance, Tom Nook and KK Slider, they were there from the beginning, then Blathers would be added on the GameCube. Isabelle would practically be the face of the franchise after New Leaf, but does anybody really remember Frillard? Yeah, this is where things get weird and conspiracy theories can start to fly. Yeah, Frillard is one of the few characters that have been introduced over the years that just mysteriously disappeared and would never return in a future title. In Animal Crossing City Folk, if you went to the marquee to get an emotion, which is essentially like the little show that they would do in that game, majority of the time, the character who gives you the emotion is Dr. Shrunk, another character that's role has been reduced over the years, but there would be a rare chance occasionally that Frillard would be there instead and would take the stage and give a different emotion out to the people who see the performance. Matter of fact, outside of the marquee, you can even see his poster there alongside Dr. Shrunk's, but yeah, he was a rarer performer and seemed to be much older in age. But bam, after Animal Crossing City Folk, this character was never brought back in any capacity into a main Animal Crossing game again. Dr. Shrunk would come back one more time in Animal Crossing New Leaf, and he would get an amiibo, which did mean that in Animal Crossing New Horizons, if you had that amiibo and scanned him in, he would visit at the Roost, which we'll talk about that more later, is the case for a lot of characters that have been forgotten and removed from Animal Crossing New Horizons. Frillard stood out specifically though, because overall he's one of the few characters that isn't available to see in any capacity in New Horizons. Prior to the Roost update in Animal Crossing New Horizons, there was even a lot of speculation that Tordomer, the former mayor of the older Animal Crossing games, had passed away. I mean, he was getting up there in age and had retired in New Leaf, and then in New Horizons he was nowhere in the game. So it was reassuring to see that Tordomer survived when the 2.0 update released. Other fans had speculated about another older character, Joan, being replaced by Daisy May. Did she pass away? No, she makes a small appearance and we'll circle back to that soon. So we had answers for a lot of these characters that obviously didn't die, except Frillard. What is this character up to nowadays? Okay, to be fair though, Frillard obviously wasn't Nintendo's attempt of making a brand new mascot to represent the franchise, but a character that did gain quite a bit of notoriety and was pretty recognizable was the character Gracie, who originally appeared in the first Animal Crossing game and would appear in every subsequent game in a pretty substantial way, actually having a more involved role with each new Animal Crossing title until New Horizons released, and this character was gone, just like these other characters. Gracie was interesting, mostly just being a fashionista for the first two Animal Crossing games, later getting upgraded to having a very, very high-end and expensive store in both Animal Crossing City Folk and in New Leaf. There were even some other things involving Gracie Grace that had occurred, such as an appearance in other video games, or I guess like a subtle reference to her clothing line. And I think out of special characters that have been in the franchise for a long time, Gracie was one of the most surprising ones to see not return in a larger capacity in New Horizons, not at the beginning of the game, and especially not later on in the 2.0 update, where we most probably would have assumed this character would have made a return. She can show up in the Roost, as with a lot of these characters, but still, there's something weird about the fact that this character is gone in a main way. When Animal Crossing New Leaf came out, two new major characters were introduced, Isabelle and Digby. Now obviously Isabelle, being the secretary and more involved in the actual gameplay of the day-to-day experience a player has, became the center spotlight and the big focal point, but Digby still had his role being in charge of the whole street pass area. Matter of fact, it seemed like for a long time Nintendo fully expected Digby to be a mainstay character in the Animal Crossing universe moving forward, alongside the introduction of his sister character Isabelle. To solidify the evidence to this, if we look at Happy Home Designer for the 3DS, Digby plays a pretty substantial role in the Happy Home Designer team. There's even this little hint that there might be a little, fling going on between Lottie and Digby. And then when Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival came out, who was one of the main playable characters? Digby. He even had a special edition of the game sold with his Amiibo character. He was so cool, and then New Horizons came out and poof. this character was forgotten about. He vanished. Subtly alluded to in maybe a not so newsworthy announcement by Isabelle where she briefly mentions that she has a brother but doesn't name drop him. Now, of course, Digby was the only character to be sidelined in New Horizons, but when Happy Home Paradise was announced, a lot of people expected Digby to make a return as he was such a big player in the Happy Home Designer game for the 3DS, and yeah, he doesn't work for Happy Home Paradise. He got replaced by this little monkey dude. Now, if you had the amiibo for Digby and you scan him in at the Roost, he will come and visit, and you can learn a little bit about what he's up to, and apparently he works for the Happy Home Academy raiding people's houses. But man, what a fall from grace this character has had, being one of the front-running characters, borderline one of the mascot-type characters of the franchise, being pushed alongside characters like Tom Nook, KK Slider, and Isabelle, just to fall all the way down to a character that we used to know. Some people aren't going to agree with me on this one, but Rover actually deserves his spot on this video. Sure, he is in New Horizons to a very limited capacity. He shows up one day out of the year at Tom Nook's big Earth Day extravaganza where he flies you to a different island and makes you do a maze. No, I'm a huge fan of the maze thing, and it is interesting to see a character like Rover show up, and it's nice to see an homage to an older character, but Rover also kind of had a little bit of a fall too. Now, this isn't new to this character. In the original Animal Crossing game, he shows up at the beginning. He's the person that gets you in touch with Tom Nook, and you tell him about yourself, your name, and all of that type of stuff. And occasionally you'd maybe see him when traveling to a friend's town. Animal Crossing Wild World, he did get backseated a bit, but would maybe show up as an Easter egg, so the character was already reduced in his role substantially then. But in Animal Crossing City Folk, his character was then elevated to one of the highest roles he's ever had. He was the character that would greet you every single time you loaded up the game. He would be just there, you'd want to make sure it was actually you, and then he would send you off into your town. At least he was like a memorable character, but back in the City Folk days, he was a character you literally saw every single day. More than Tom Nook, more than your favorite villager, he was just there, omnipresent. Rover, there he is. And then in Animal Crossing New Leaf, he kind of got sidestepped a little bit again, this time just being back to his GameCube role of talking to the player on a train, but still he was fulfilling his original role, which was really cool. But then of course New Horizons releases and he's not in the game at all. And then he finally does have a role after all of that time when they do the update, and you talk to him for like a minute, and that's it. Until next year, if I decide to do the maze next year. There's also a handful of characters that had pretty established roles when it came to Animal Crossing that would be just straight up cut and replaced when it came time to release Animal Crossing New Horizons. Other than maybe just doing something completely fresh, there is no real rhyme or reason why the original characters who had special roles were removed, but look at Chip and look at Nat, who were the fishing and bug experts in Animal Crossing games, which were replaced by CJ and Flick, respectively. Copper and Booker, along with Porter, all had roles of handling the multiplayer functionality in Animal Crossing games, with Booker and Copper doing it in Animal Crossing Wild World and City Folk, and Porter doing it in the original Animal Crossing game and later on in New Leaf. But none of these characters would be back for New Horizons, and instead we got the Dodo Boys. Joan ended up getting fully replaced by Daisy May, which I don't really hate too much because at the very least Joan did get to appear in Happy Home Paradise for a little thing. And like with most of these on the list, if the character just wasn't fully erased from history, like, you know, Frillard was, or delegated to just like a little coffee shop appearance, I wouldn't have as much of a problem. Daisy May's a cool character, but yeah, an example of a character who just replaced another character. Also, can we talk about how Pelly, Pete, and Phyllis all got completely put out of business also by those Dodo Boys? Nowadays, we just mail the letters from the airport instead, and Pelly and Phyllis lost their role at the Civic Center as Town Hall or Resident Services became the replacement, and Isabelle was introduced. It's even sadder when you've read the dialogue where Phyllis explains how she doesn't like her job but doesn't feel like she has skills to work in a different industry and is kind of sticking with the job through the hardships because of that. And then Isabelle comes and like takes her job, so essentially now Phyllis, I don't know whatever ended up happening to her, but it couldn't have been good. Then there's characters like Phineas, who are really interesting because he was introduced in Animal Crossing City Folk and showed up in Animal Animal Crossing New Leaf briefly, but this character would just come along and, I don't know, give you balloons? Like, that was so hype. I didn't know what this character was when I was playing City Folk recently, and when I got my balloon, I was thrilled for at least 15 minutes. Wendell was a really interesting character. In the older games, he would give you really cool design patterns that you could choose to save, and in New Leaf, if you went and visited someone's dream address, you could actually get their patterns and copy them down by talking to Wendell. This feature would have been amazing to have in Animal Crossing New Horizons, but they ended up cutting that. Or him. His whole existence is gone. We did get Wardle, interestingly enough, with Animal Crossing Happy Home Paradise, but his role is much, much different. He kind of lets you just reorder stuff from houses that you've decorated. Okay, and then this next one maybe isn't one that needs to be brought up as often, but it's still interesting nonetheless. But the characters Pepe, Giovanni, and Carlo, they were all introduced in Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, and they do have a very specific role. They help you paint your RV, and they run OK Motors or whatever. When they were initially released in Pocket Camp, I assumed that these characters, went through the whole design process, were introduced to this game because they would have a bigger role in the future mainline Animal Crossing game. However, that never ended up actually becoming a thing, and instead, these characters were, as quickly as they were introduced, also quickly forgotten as well. They had potential. I don't know what they would do. Maybe they could paint different buildings in your island or something, like change the color of the airport or something along those lines. I don't know. I'm throwing ideas out there. Nonetheless, they didn't. They didn't come back, they were gone. But then there's also other Animal Crossing characters that were just special event characters that were in multiple Animal Crossing titles, but then just disappeared also when it came time for New Horizons release. Like, for instance, there was the cat Blanca, who was always missing a face for some reason. It became your job to draw a new face for this cat, and that cat would rock that face, whether it was good or not very good. We've also spent some time talking about these two characters in other videos before, but there were two characters named Caitlyn and Cat, and it was essentially like a little kid who gets lost, and as a villager hero or whatever, you could reunite this child with their lost mother, or I guess you could just ignore them and abandon her altogether. I mean, there's no real repercussions of doing that either. It's just really interesting to me how all of these characters just mysteriously were not chosen to be included in Animal Crossing New Horizons in any substantial way, but we get Gulliver not once, but twice in the form of Gulliver and Gullivar. Also, while we're talking about this, we could mention that Cap'n had this whole entire family in Animal Crossing New Leaf, and they would hang out over on Tordomer's Island, and you could go there and catch insects and whatnot, and the whole gang was there. It was like a cool little family get-together that you got to meet Cap'n's family after all this time. There was Leilani, who was Cap'n's wife. She would work the reception desk on Tordomer Island and allow you to go on tours or return back to your town. They had a kid named Layla, who was like this young turtle, and she ran this little supermarket where she would buy your stuff that you tried to sell to her, but she straight up was a scam artist because she'd only give you 5% of their full value. And I get it, they were trying to be like, oh look, it's a little kid, they don't know how money works. Yeah, but there's a scam going on here. I just believe that. Still a clever character though. And then there was Grams, who was Cap'n's mother, and she ran like a little store where you could trade in metals for different furniture items. I'm always a fan of having more shops to shop from, so I liked this idea, and it was kind of weird these characters didn't get a role in some way with the Mystery Islands being such a major part of Animal Crossing New Horizons. You would have thought they could have set up a little shop or something, but their role was mostly delegated to Wilbur, I guess, if we had to try to get as close as possible to a character fulfilling that similar role. Nonetheless, rest in peace this family not being included in New Horizons. Then there were two other smaller characters. They were never massive characters to begin with, so it's not too surprising that they were fully removed. But in the original Animal Crossing game, there was Farley, and then in Animal Crossing City Folk, there was Serena. Essentially, they lived inside of a fountain. You could like throw axes in there or do stuff for them, and they would get you like a special version of an axe. Ultimately, these characters really just existed to give players a way of getting like an upgraded axe in sub capacity, so it wasn't that big of a deal that these characters were removed, but yeah, they were older characters that didn't come back either. Also, this next one just kind of confuses me a little bit, but there's Tordomer, and then there's Cornama, which I always thought was the same character, just one of them was wearing an acorn mask, but On the Animal Crossing fan wiki Nookipedia, they're listed as completely separate characters, so I don't know. I'm completely stunned by this one. Is Cornama actually a second character? He first appeared in Wild World and came back in New Horizons. Does he just take Tordomer's spot for a little while? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments on that one. It is really interesting though, seeing the substantial amount of characters that have been kind of removed from the Animal Crossing franchise, and it paints a larger picture to some commentary of Animal Crossing New Horizons as a whole. It was kind of a new version of the game series, taking things in a newish direction, and some characters had to be trimmed off to maybe fit the style that they were going for with Animal Crossing New Horizons. But I also understand the criticisms that New Horizons got, especially during the earliest days with the game. The reputation New Horizons has of lacking some of the characters and features really stemmed from the earliest days where even more characters were missing from the lineup. I mean, there was characters like Leaf, Cyrus and Reese, Katrina, Red. All of the characters are in New Horizons to some capacity, but in day one of Animal Crossing New Horizons, definitely not at all. So these characters were just gone. Fortunately, these ones made their way back, but it does make us wonder what happened to some of those other characters, like Frillard and Gracie. Which character would you like to see return in a future Animal Crossing game that needs to come back that wasn't in New Horizons? Let us know in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe and notifications on for more videos like this. Thank you guys for all of the support. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.